So, today's episode of Transformers Prime is something else, man. To the point that I don't really know how to introduce the episode, so I'm just going to jump right into it. Bulkhead wakes up hangover style on the Nemesis and has to sneak around trying to find his way off of the flying spaceship, even though he can't fly. A task which he is obviously not suited to doing because he's big, lumbering, and not all that intelligent in any situation other than battle, to the point that he is only saved by the fact that there are only like 3 Decepticons left who fit in the crossover of the Venn diagram labeled characters still allowed on the Nemesis and characters important enough to kill Bulkhead. So he's really only left avoiding Viacons, who are even dumber than he is, so it's not much of an issue. He does, however, bump into Starscream, who is not only not allowed to be here, which is good, it means he can't alert the others without revealing himself and getting himself killed, but he also shouldn't have been able to get here in the first place. He can't fly anymore, remember. He doesn't have a T-Cog, so he can't transform. Except, he tries to attack Bulkhead, but instead of using the missiles that are on the exterior of his arms, he transforms his arms into null rays, which he shouldn't be able to do. But this is just one part of a brief altercation between himself and Bulkhead, which involves him bringing up Cliff Jumper again because he's too big of an idiot to stop doing that, and so Bulkhead literally beats him to death right there on the floor of one of the Nemesis corridors. And like, man, I love this version of Starscream, but the dude deserved it, so I can't quite say that I'm upset to say that he's definitely dead for sure and that this wasn't some sort of fake out on the part of the episode. Yep, Starscream, one of the most important characters in the Transformers canon, was killed before he's still alive. He wasn't killed before the titles. He's still alive. This was one of his clones, because Starscream has clones in this episode, because of course he does. We get a flashback to the previous day to show how these two characters ended up where they were. Bulkhead, tracking down a Energon signature, accidentally got swept up in an Energon retrieval tubule thingy when the Nemesis sent one down to bring up a bunch of Energon. So that's how he got there. As for the clone Starscream, he and 4 other identical clones were created by Starscream, who was raiding an old Decepticon ship, scavenging for Energon, only to find 5 protoforms, which are sort of like unborn Transformers. They're blank slates that have identities imprinted on them at birth. And Starscream, being the dumbest character in the entire continuity of Transformers apparently, decided the best thing to do would be to imprint his own personality on all 5 of them, because that's not going to get him killed or anything. Like, the clones obviously pretend to be of one mind with him, but they're just him. They're going to play along with him until they get the chance to kill him and take his place. That's Starscream in a nutshell. He should know this. Just like he should have known that these newborns would have all of their organs. That might be the weirdest sentence I've ever said. I'm trying to think. I've said some weird sentences for this channel before. Nope, that's definitely, if not the weirdest, it's up there. But yeah, these 5 newborn clone Starscreams have their T-Cogs. Which makes me wonder, did the protoforms have T-Cogs, or did the T-Cogs form when they were imprinted with their identities? Because if they already had their T-Cogs before they were Starscream, he should have just cut one open and taken his T-Cog for himself. But now there are 5 other Starscreams, all of whom can transform. They head off to the Nemesis, and one of them bumped into Bulkhead and was beaten to death by Bulkhead. This is a kid's show, right? But because they're all the same person, technically, Starscream feels it when his clone is beaten to death. Again, I have to ask myself, this is a kid's show, right? Anyway, as the other 4 clones are making their way through the ship, because they have to get from like the lower aft section of the ship up to the top front, that is the bridge, Bulkhead has time to find a communications console and try to contact his friends, who are no doubt looking for him. But he fails, and he accidentally signals Arachnid, so now she's part of this too, because she wants to kill Megatron too, And she has that whole army of Insecticons that I forgot about until I saw them again. So she compels them to wake up, which takes some time, giving the Autobots time to detect them coming to life underground. So now the Autobots are part of this huge mess of an episode too. They show up just in time to see the Insecticons flying off towards the Nemesis, which, remember, Arachnid only knows where it is because of Bulkhead. It's Bulkhead's fault that this is about to happen. I mean, not really, but it's still kind of. And even though Arachnid calls back some of the Insecticons to deal with the Autobots, and even though she runs away like a scaredy cat, because no matter how deadly you are, once RC starts trying to kill you in earnest, you run. It's really the best option. Her Insecticons, the ones that she pulled back to deal with the Autobots, are still all destroyed, and she is still trapped in one of their stasis pods. So she's effectively defeated for the time being, and when she's defeated, her psychic control of them disappears, and now Megatron has an army of Insecticons. Wow, I'm so excited! Before that happens, though, he's faced with the 4 clones of Starscream, and I love this scene. It's one of my favorite scenes in all of Transformers Prime. I wish I could just show it to you in its entirety without this video getting flagged. But imagine this. A single Starscream standing at the main console on the bridge, knowing that Megatron will be called to the bridge, and find him there, posturing pompously in that Starscreamish manner, giving 3 other Starscreams time to flank Megatron. That's more than enough firepower to destroy Megatron, even Megatron. And yet they hesitate so that they can brag at Megatron, giving him time to tempt them into killing the original Starscream for him and becoming his collective second in command. And they actually buy it long enough that they are distracted long enough for the Insecticons to show up, providing Megatron with an additional distraction which allows him to kill 3 of the Starscreams and wound the 4th, escaping a trap which would have killed him. This is Megatron we're talking about. Starscream had him beaten, but because of inherent flaws in Starscream's personality, Megatron still won out, proving once and for all that Starscream cannot beat Megatron. It's so good, and because Megatron was still distracted enough that he only wounded the 4th one, it's able to return to Starscream in the end and try to betray him, something which Starscream, to his credit, does actually see coming. I honestly didn't expect he would. I thought that this final clone would be like the new Starscream for the rest of the series the first time I saw this episode, but the original Starscream sees it coming and betrays his clone instead, and we find out in a couple episodes that he actually removed its T-Cog to transplant into himself so that he can make himself whole again. Meanwhile, Bulkhead, who's been wandering the ship this whole time, finds the engine room and destroys the engine, crashing the Nemesis. So even though Megatron ended up with an army of hulking monster Transformers, at least his ship can't fly anymore until next episode. I guess that's a fair trade-off, but this does give Bulkhead a chance to get off of the ship, though he does bump into the final Starscream on its way off of the ship, which I'm sure was a rather confusing moment for him. And the episode ends on him returning to the Autobot base, expecting to have the best story of all time to tell them, only to stumble upon the stasis pod containing Arachnid, realizing that perhaps their day was at least somewhat as interesting as his own. This is also the scene where RC seems very content with the fact that she didn't kill Arachnid, which I would not have been in her place, to which Optimus says,
"You are stronger for the choice you made."
Yeah, but so is Arachnid, and she's really dangerous, so you guys might want to kill her anyway. They don't. Of course, she comes back later. Good, guys, am I right? This episode is fantastic. I love it a lot. It's super manic. It never stops. And the status quo gets shaken up so much. The Nemesis is downed, which, even though it doesn't stay down for long, that does lead to a shake-up in the status quo, even once it's back in the air. We'll see that next episode. And even though the Insecticons seemed a lot easier to deal with in this episode, maybe because they're, like, premature, maybe Arachnid woke them up before they were finished developing or something. Megatron still has an army of them, and they are still more dangerous than the Vehicons. And while Arachnid is no longer a player in events, at least for the time being, Starscream will be a major player in events again in just a few short episodes. It's so brilliantly written and so brilliantly handled. It takes all these plot points that have been simmering throughout the show for so long and brings them to a boil all at once and makes it work in an episode that is action-packed, interesting, and funny. It is a funny episode. There are several funny moments, and I think even a couple of really interesting references to the greater Transformers lore. The Starscream clones, for example, are obviously only here because Transformers Animated did a very similar thing with Starscream, using the Allspark to imprint himself on a bunch of protoforms, creating a bunch of clones, each of which represent a different aspect of his personality, which turned out to be that universe's version of the Seekers, the Starscream look-alike characters from the original cartoon. And while the animated versions of the Starscream clones were definitely more interesting because they were all different characters, and the show made multiple arcs out of the characters and even made a finale out of the concept of Starscream cloning himself and imprinting himself on protoforms, the concept was still handled well here, in what was both an homage and also something quite different. They could have done effectively the same thing here and given Starscream his own little mini team, and they didn't, keeping him the lone wolf character that I love him as. This version of Starscream is great in part because he doesn't have any allies, and yet he just keeps coming back. And that's the other thing that I think might have been a reference here. The fact that Bulkhead bumps back into Starscream after literally killing him at one point, I think might be a reference to the fact that in the original cartoon, Starscream had an immortal spark. He couldn't actually die. Something that was also referenced in Transformers Animated when he got a shard of the Allspark stuck in him, which also prevented him from dying. The first one's definitely a reference, the second one might not be, but if it is, it's a really good one. It's just subtle enough that you doubt whether or not it is what it might be. And that's the kind of reference I really like. So not only is this episode perfectly balanced in terms of plots, not only is it funny and action-packed, but it's also referential to the rest of the franchise. This might be the perfect single episode of Transformers Prime. Seriously. If you doubt that I'm telling you the truth here, just go on YouTube and search up that scene I was talking about where Megatron is faced by the 4 Starscream clones. I'm sure somebody's uploaded it somewhere, and watch it. Just watch Megatron so perfectly manipulate these 4 beings who are definitely strong enough together to end him, as if it's a game. It's fantastic. As per usual, though, guys, I'd like to know, what do you think of Armada if you have seen it? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord, link in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.